Can't hear.
So it is our good fortune to have with us distinguished guests, Attorney Martha Conley and Professor Jerry Dickinson, to lend their expertise to the topic of voters' rights and education. Before we begin the discussion, I would like to share with you a little of their background. Attorney Martha Conley is the first African American woman to graduate from the University of Pittsburgh School of Law and the first African American female lawyer admitted to practice law in Allegheny County. She is a national, she is a retired corporate attorney who is involved in human rights activism. She is the co-host for Pennsylvanians for Alternative Death Penalty. Her interests include eliminating mass incarceration, opposition to the death penalty, and voters' rights. Professor Jerry Dickinson is an associate professor at the University of Pittsburgh School of Law, where he specializes in constitutional law. He is also a human rights activist and community activist. In addition to constitutional law, he specializes in property law, federalism and government, state and local government, affordable housing laws and policies, urban development, and racial justice issues. He is also a former candidate for the U.S. Congress for Pennsylvania's 18th congressional district. On behalf of the National Council of Negro Women, Rankin-Mon Valley, Pittsburgh section, welcome.
Thank you. I don't think we can hear Alice.
Uh,
Alice, can we hear you now? No, I can't hear you.
no, I can't.
I think she can hear us, but I don't think we can hear her.
Okay, well, we could start. Could you give us some information about the Voters' Rights Act? We know that it was passed in the House of Representatives, but not in the Senate. And we wonder when it will be, if and when it will be passed.
Sure. It's a difficult question as to when it will get passed. And the Voting Rights Advancement Act, which was proposed by the U.S. House of Representatives just before, and then it obviously gained a lot of steam after John Lewis passed away. And the law was really created in remembrance of John Lewis, but also in an effort to overturn a very unfortunate Supreme Court decision in 2013, which that Supreme Court decision was called Shelby County versus Holder. And that decision is where the Supreme Court struck down pre-clearance provisions of the Voting Rights Act of 1965. And those pre-clearance provisions, they required states, mostly in the South, that had been engaging in discriminatory voting patterns. And we're talking about Mississippi and Louisiana and South Carolina, Texas, Virginia, even parts of New York, Alabama. These were states that were consistently discriminating against African Americans and putting up roadblocks to actually voting. And the law required pre-clearance requirements. So if these states wanted to alter their voting laws, they had to get the permission from Congress, essentially. And that Voting Rights Act of 65 really allowed and ensured that African Americans were not disenfranchised from voting. And the law worked, and it did stop voter ID laws that were discriminatory. It struck down literacy tests. It struck down poll taxes where you actually had to pay a fee to vote. It struck down purging voter rolls and other such disenfranchisement. Well, the problem is, of course, with the Supreme Court decision, it wiped all those pre-clearance requirements out. All these states now were permitted to engage in discriminatory voting actions. And what we saw in 2013, right amidst the Obama administration, was many of these southern states actually enacting discriminatory laws, voter ID laws that made it much more difficult for African Americans to vote. And so this new law, which is the Voting Rights Advancement Act, in the name of John Lewis, is meant to create new pre-clearance laws. And so now, and the reason why it hasn't got through, it hasn't got passed, is because the United States Senate, the upper chamber, which is held by predominantly Republicans, they don't want to move forward with it, largely because by enacting the law, it'll make it easier, of course, for African Americans to vote. And as we know, the Black community comes out in droves to vote during general elections, and they don't want that to happen. And so it's sitting at Mitch McConnell's desk, and we don't know when we'll get to passing it.
Mm-hmm. And does it apply to all states?
Well, yes. So there are provisions, or at least there have been proposals to actually expand it to significance to more states than just the kind of the pre-clearance states back in the 1965 version of the Voting Rights Act. And that's actually been a key area of debate amongst members of Congress, is whether to expand it to every single state or whether or not it's just to be narrowly tailored to states that have a significant history of discrimination.
Mm-hmm. And since President Trump won Pennsylvania in 2016,
yeah,
do you feel that we are targeted, that Pennsylvania is targeted, and African Americans in Pennsylvania are targeted?
I do, and for a number of reasons. Because Pennsylvania is now, and was a swing state, right?
Mm-hmm.
Won by Trump in 2016. Higher voter turnout because of mail-in ballots is the reality. We're going to have a higher voter turnout because of that. And in particular, in the urban enclaves of Allegheny County, Pittsburgh, of course, and the Philadelphia area, and also Harrisburg, we're going to likely see an increase in voter turnout in the African American community. As a result of that, I do expect there to be concerted efforts by opposition to stop and to disenfranchise Black voters. And one way that this is happening, and it's not necessarily as overt as you might imagine, but issues related to whether or not those with prior criminal records can actually vote that's now coming into play. A significant number of folks who actually have a criminal record can vote, but many of them don't believe they can. I mean, I have family members who call me and say, I can't vote. And when I ran for Congress, they said, I can't vote for you because I have a misdemeanor. I said, no, you can vote for me, right? So it's a misinformation that we're dealing with now that I expect to come down the line. And as the title of this wonderful show is, it's about education. We really have to get out there and educate our community and let people know that if you are in prison for a felony at that time, then you cannot vote. If you're in prison with a felony, but otherwise, you can vote even with a criminal record. So that's just one.
So if you've been incarcerated and you've served your time and you're out and you're not on probation, you can vote.
You can vote.
If you're on probation, can you vote?
Yes.
If you're on probation, you can vote. Yes. Yeah. Parole, probation. Yep.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
So.
And also here I know in Pittsburgh, they were
Nope. I think
that they can purge your names from the voting list and you can't vote.
So you paused there for a moment. I didn't hear the question.
Is it true that if you have not voted in the last 2 presidential elections, your name can be purged from the voting rolls and you can't vote? Is that true?
From what I understand, I think this has changed. And so to the best of my knowledge, I do know that after a certain period of time has passed, and I don't know whether it's 2 presidential elections or whether it's longer than that, but after a certain period of time, yes, it is possible that the state could purge your name from the voting rolls. But that is precisely what we're trying to do, is to stop any type of a voter purge is altogether, right? Because just because you haven't voted in X number of years doesn't mean that you may end up doing it again. Requiring you to then re-register is just another hurdle and another way to suppress and disenfranchise the vote.
So how soon after you turn 18, if you're going to be 18 in October, can you register to vote in November?
Yes, you would have to be, I believe if you turn 18 and you were able to register by, and I have to look back at the date, it's October 19th, I think is the deadline for actually voting, then yes, you will be permitted to vote come November 3rd. Okay.
And can you talk a little bit about fake ballots? What's the difference between a fake ballot and a naked ballot?
Yeah, so this Pennsylvania Supreme Court just recently came down with a decision, and I'm sure, Martha, you know about this. It was all about a week or 2 ago, and the decision actually dealt with a number of issues related to voting, including the location of places to drop off your mail-in ballot to these ballots called naked ballots. Okay. And what the Supreme Court found was that under Pennsylvania election law, it actually requires that voters, if they're going to do mail-in ballot, it requires them to put their ballot into a secret envelope.
Yeah.
For purposes of privacy, presumably. One may argue it's just another barrier to actually voting, but you have to put this ballot after you've crossed off your name, and hopefully in June 2nd, it was my name that someone was crossing off for the congressional race, but put it into the secret ballot and then put it into the envelope to send off to the election office. And there were thousands of voters who weren't putting it in the secret ballot. They were just putting it in the envelope to send off to the election office. And the Supreme Court said, if you do that, your vote, your ballot is invalid. And from what I understand, the statistics, and Martha, you can correct me if I'm wrong about this, but I think there's possibly, at least in Philadelphia County, upwards to 100,000 some voters, ballots that may end up being invalidated because of this. And there's a lot of confusion and chaos as to whether or not you can still then show up at the poll on the day of to vote, or whether you can then get another ballot and do it the right way with this secrecy ballot. So in other words, you don't put it in the secret envelope and it's a naked ballot, it's invalid, which is just makes
Yeah.
it harder. Yeah.
Yeah, you should be. I think you should be able to go to Votes PA and determine whether your ballot has been accepted or not.
Mhm.
But with respect to the other question you asked about the fake ballots, I have run into that. It's kind of a long story. I went to my aunt's house to pick up her application to put it in the mail. I mailed hers and mine at the same time. And then 2 days later, she gets a ballot in the mail. Now, this was about 2 or 3 weeks ago. And she couldn't possibly have gotten the Pennsylvania ballot by that time because they hadn't been sent out. They weren't sent out until the 25th. So I was really I was really puzzled by that. And then a couple days later, a canvasser from BPEP showed up at my door, and he said that he had run into somebody in my neighborhood who swore she had already voted. And I said, well, that's impossible. And I went across the street to a neighbor who had worked on the polls for years, and she was convinced that she had already voted. And that this was, 2 weeks before the ballots even were mailed.
Mhm.
The ballots were delayed because of litigation. They couldn't print them because they got the third party off of the ballot, and then they could print the ballots. And so they weren't able to send them out until last Friday. So anybody who voted before last Friday hasn't really voted in Pennsylvania. And so they need to go ahead and if they haven't applied, they should have applied already for their ballot. But put that in the mail, and it shouldn't go to Georgia, which is apparently where this fake ballot came from. It should go downtown to Forbes Avenue to the Allegheny County Election Office.
So just how safe is the mail-in?
Well, it depends on Trump and whether he's going to slow the mail sufficiently to keep people from voting. Initially I had planned to go to the polls because I thought that would be safer, and then I did some research on the machines that they're using, and I decided that I'm going to drop my ballot off downtown at the election office. I think that would be the safest thing to do.
Yeah.
Well, last year I delivered some ballots for senior citizens,
Mm-hmm.
and I took them downtown to the elections office. I was not impressed with the way they just had ballots in boxes sitting on the floor.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
you can't. I don't know about Allegheny County, but I did some calling for Philadelphia, and they weren't letting people bring more than their own ballot.
Right. Yeah.
So
Oh no, I took ballots for at least three or four senior citizens because I had got them to register and they're disabled.
yeah.
So I can carry the ballots downtown.
Yeah, there
Mhm.
was, I think Pennsylvania requires that the individual voter places it in the mail or actually is there in person, attests to the ballot and signs it. And
Well, they had given me a form that the citizens had to sign, giving me permission to take their because two of the ladies were disabled,
Yep.
and I had the form signed that I had their permission to deliver their ballots, but I was not impressed with where they just had them thrown in boxes. So I questioned how they were going to be counted, and I was told that the ballots would be taken to the old post office on the north side, and that's where they were going to be counted.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yes, so what they have done, part of the Supreme Court decision recently was to allow and give each county discretion on where to open up drop boxes for ballots.
Right.
And so it could be the county building downtown, or there are some counties that have now opened up libraries and other places to make it more convenient, obviously, to vote, to get your ballot in. Whereas other states, such as Texas, are now restricting the number of polling places. In fact, in some counties in Texas, there's only one drop box or one location to drop off. And as you can imagine, again, another form of voter suppression, right? If you can only travel by bus or by some public transit, and it makes it very difficult for you to get to a polling
Mm-hmm.
or a drop box place that is 30 miles away or wherever it may be, that's a form of voter suppression, and it's problematic. So luckily here in Pennsylvania, we do have relatively, I think, useful, strong laws to protect voters, but we have to be vigilant. And on the mail-in and versus the poll, I mean, they're really on the grand scheme of things. There's not a whole lot of evidence to suggest that mail-in ballots are causing fraud,
Mhm.
or there's a lot of disenfranchisement going on with mail-in ballots. For the most part, it's relatively smooth. It's been relatively smooth given what
Okay.
we've had to deal with since the pandemic. So.
Could you talk a little bit and explain about the Electoral College and how that affects the outcome of the election?
Sure, Martha. Do you want me to go?
Yes.
I'm happy to go.
Go ahead.
So this semester I'm teaching constitutional law, so I'm walking my students through the electoral.
But before you get started, I think we have a Facebook question.
Oh, we do. Oh, sure.
It's from Lorraine Penn, and she wants to know, when I get my mail and ballot, my ballot in the mail and decide to vote at the polls, what should I do? Should she use her ballot, or should she vote it? Can she change her mind and vote at the polls?
I think she can, but I don't trust the machines. There's so much corruption around the machines. There are only two companies in the United States that produce these voting machines, and they have 80% of the market, and they're private equity, so we don't know too much about who is running these companies. And apparently there are back doors to them. Some of them are programmed in Serbia. There's just so many issues with these machines. I would prefer to put it in the mail or take it downtown to the election office.
So you think the mail-in ballots are safer than the machine?
That's my opinion.
And I don't trust the mail-in.
Well, yeah, I mean that's also an issue. That's why I said I'm taking mine downtown. But I'm rethinking that based on what you just said, Alice.
Well,
Okay.
I'd like to add that a politician in Philadelphia, he was on MSNBC yesterday evening.
Yeah.
He mentioned that they may not count the mail-in ballots.
Well, yeah, that was Representative Kenyatta, I believe.
Yeah, I think
on Rachel Maddow. Yeah, I saw that. Apparently, there are three Republican legislators, one Democrat, and they've indicated that they're going to be challenging the ballots while the vote is going on. So, it just
I think there's going to be quite a bit of the litigation. Some of it, I think, is grandstanding to scare folks. I think, especially on the Republican side, right away we're seeing this over and over again. This scare tactic of we're gonna, stop your mail-in ballot, and we're gonna litigate this and go to court, and as Trump says, throw the election to the Supreme Court. I think it seems to be all part of a much larger scheme to scare, particularly Democratic voters. And I say to folks, if you get the mail-in ballot in the mail, you really do. You have an option. I don't want to say go do one or the other. Just vote. I would say whichever way you.
Well, I guess do what's comfortable for you. Yeah. So getting back to the Electoral College, Attorney Dickinson, can you explain what that is, why it exists, and how it came about?
Yeah. So the Electoral College, it is the primary mode for which the President of the United States is elected here. And it has a very interesting history. I'll give a quick overview of it because I think it's important for folks to know how it came about. The Electoral College, largely, obviously in the late 1700s, but also 1800s, the most persuasive understanding of why the Electoral College was actually created was to benefit the southern states in the 1800s. The southern states, which, if you had a direct popular vote system, that is one vote, one person, one vote system, which I think we should have, but we don't, then the southern states would be completely locked out of competing in presidential elections because of the population density being so low. But because of the Electoral College, they instituted it, and because slaves at the time, there was an exception, which 3/5 vote, African Americans, slaves, their vote was worth 3/5. The southern states had far more slaves than the northern states. And so as a result of that, they were able to combine the significant number of the population of slaves and utilize those votes. And that's why for the first 8 out of 9, I believe, elections in United States history was won by a Virginian, precisely because of the number, significant number and population of slaves at the time. And as time went on, of course, the 13th Amendment and emancipation obviously passed, but the Electoral College still stayed intact. And that's why we have it. That's the most persuasive argument. There's plenty of other theories.
Is there a need for it now?
No, not anymore.
There's not a need for the Electoral College at this point. The way this usually goes, Democrats win big states and Republicans win more states, many of them being smaller states. And that being said, the spread of victories for president between Democrats and Republicans is actually relatively equal. It's really not that disproportionate. So the Electoral College hasn't really kind of given the presidency to Republicans more than Democrats. But I think people say to themselves, why does my vote not count as much in this state versus this other state?
So if there's no need for it, why do we still have it?
I think it's just because I think honestly this is the system we have for so long, and there's a fear of changing things. If we go to a national vote or popular vote, what are the unintended consequences for doing that? Even though all the data suggests it's the best way to go. One person, one vote. That's how it should be. And think about this too. At the state level, we have 50 states, and we elect a governor, which is like a mini president, every 4 years. And we do it by popular vote. We don't have mini electoral colleges for each 50 state. We have a popular vote. We voted in.
I think we have a caller on the line.
Yeah.
Do we have a caller on the line?
Oh.
Caller.
The caller
State your name and your question, please.
Oh. Did we lose
Maybe
him?
not. Yeah, I think we did.
So we don't.
So will the Electoral College have a say-so in this election?
It sure will. Yes, it will. And 538, I believe, electorates or electors for Electoral College. You got to get the 270 to win the election for a president. And so Pennsylvania will be very important. In fact, it's probably the most important state. It has 20 electors, and so it's a significant portion. And because it's a swing state, it may determine whether it's Biden or Trump this time around. So that's why.
Really?
The ball's in our court.
Yeah.
Here in Pennsylvania.
Mm-hmm. Well, now at some point, there's sometimes the Supreme Court ends up deciding who wins. How does that happen?
Well, Martha, you want to?
Well, it happened in 2000 with Bush Gore, and there was apparently there is a deadline for the states to certify the election results. I think it's in December, something like that. Mm-hmm. And I guess Florida didn't make the deadline, and so the Supreme Court stepped in with the help of. No, I'm going to get that wrong. I forget two interesting people were involved in that discussion or in that decision, including Clarence Thomas, I think. And that was the year of the hanging chads, I believe. And so the Supreme Court stepped in, and Gore apparently didn't challenge a decision to let the Supreme Court make the decision.
Yeah.
How often has that occurred, that the Supreme Court has had to make the decision?
I think 2000 was the only time.
Yeah.
Every time. Oh, wow.
Yeah. The Supreme Court, that's it. And, the Supreme Court, they found that Florida's election system was unequal, the way that they were actually categorizing the votes. And they said it's a violation of the Equal Protection Clause. And they threw it back to, they essentially threw it back to Bush and Gore, really. I mean, Gore could have, as Martha says, he could have challenged and kept it going and really forcing the issue. But I think, out of decorum and out of respect for our democracy and realizing that not giving up not giving up may have caused civil unrest. And so I think Gore was smart enough to realize, you know what, I lost and we're going to give it to Bush, even though a lot of Democrats didn't like that. So,
and actually, I think John Kerry also later after that election, he also said that he could have challenged it, but he decided not to because of the reason that you just said, Jerry. That
Yep.
Now the president nominates to the Supreme Court. Do they choose the federal judges also?
Yes.
So they do the federal court, the
Yes.
Supreme Court, and whatever judges do they nominate?
The federal courts and the Supreme Court. Yes, the president is permitted to nominate, and the Senate typically confirms via vote. 51 senators now that's required to get a federal judge on the bench. And I clerked for the Chief Judge of the United States Court of Appeals for the Third Circuit, which is his name was Theodore McKee, and he was, I think, only a third African American to be elevated to the federal court for the Third Circuit. He took Leon Higginbotham's seat, and Leon Higginbotham was a famous civil rights lawyer who probably was in line to take Thurgood Marshall's seat, but because of Clarence Thomas, he didn't get the chance to do it.
Okay, so we have Mark Brentley on the line. Good evening, Mark. What is your question or comment, please?
Oh, he's muted, I think.
Mark, can you hear me?
Let me first, good evening, sir. And if you have a pen or pencil there, if you can just kind of take notes. I'm going to be very quick, because this is my subject. I mean, I love this stuff. And first of all, let me say I like the guests, and I really appreciate it. And start from this before pay close attention to the local and national media. Because
I can't hear him. Can you hear him?
He's breaking up.
He's breaking up.
they're starting to release what I'm referring to. That was only 3 points under Philadelphia, and they won.
Mark, we can't hear you very good.
Wake up. You know something? The black vote is the largest solid voting bloc in this country. And it's about time that they start to give us credit and stop putting all the blame on us if something doesn't go right. So please keep an eye on that. And if so, we need to counter that with the information in terms of our involvement. You've never heard a story where, if the Jewish women would just come out and vote, or hey, we can get Italian white men to come out and vote. Well, you know what? We really need those Irish to pull this thing out so we won't lose as a party. We don't hear that. But they're always isolating us. So that's one thing that I'm asking if you guys keep an eye out. The second is that I am hoping that the commission here, the NCN, would agree with me and hopefully join me. I just came off of working very hard for candidate Dickerson for Congress, and I am saying this because it's me, and that is we need to find a way to convince, approach, and engage the state political leadership about the importance of find a candidate like Jerry Dickerson, that we should find a way to lock him or her down and embrace them and bring them into the party. I've been active in politics for over 30 plus years, and for the last 7 or 8 years, there were rumors about Mike Doyle retiring. Well, we can begin to groom this young man and begin to put key people in place. He has everything that we're looking for. Highly overqualified, credentialed, and doing well with the public. And so this is my little personal thing, so please, Jerry had nothing to do with me saying this. I'm older now, and I'd like to see some of these barriers knocked down here. I don't know, but Jerry, you can tell us, I don't think we've ever had a congressperson from this region. And so when we have to find a way to support them, keep them in a position that we all will be proud of, not just us. Final comment, and I'm going to say this quickly and I'll hang up. And maybe somebody can clarify for me. I remember last year, the state, I believe, purchased new voting machines.
Yeah.
And on these new voting machines, they were removing the lever. If those new machines are going to be used on November 3rd, we should find a way to begin to remind a lot of folks that, you won't be able to go in and just say, oh, the hell with it, I'll just put straight Democrat or I'll just put straight Republican. You may have to individually select the candidate you want for that particular position. And I'm not sure if we have the machines, and so maybe some of you there may have some information about that. If it's not, then you still have the old system in place where then they can go to the party meeting. But I just wanted to share those things. But thank you very much. This is a great show, and it's really, really informative. Thank you very much. I'll hang up and listen to your response. Thank you.
It's my
Thank you, Mark.
Thanks, Mark.
my understanding that the new machines don't have a paper trail and they have barcodes, and there's no way you can tell who you voted for. So that's another reason why I don't plan on going to the polls as I had originally planned. So
Yeah, and that's the great point too, because I think the machines were not used in the spring primaries, and so I think people were used to the spring primaries, and I think that may be another reason to be a little concerned is that in the spring primaries, I believe people were just filling out sheets, their ballot, and putting them in a box, whereas now for the general election in November, we're using these machines that have never been used before. So, yeah, it's a new world for voting this time around.
So you won't be able to go in and just push the Democratic button and just vote straight Democrat. You have to push each person's name.
I'm not sure about that.
Yeah, I don't know.
Okay, and I have another question, Attorney Dickerson, about the getting back to the federal judges and Supreme Court. How you said that there's only been 3 African Americans on the federal level?
The Third Circuit Court of Appeals, there are, so the way the federal judiciary works is that there are 3 layers, a hierarchy, a ladder of sorts. The very beginning is the federal district courts, and there are hundreds of those. In fact, in total, there are 677 federal district court judges, and they deal at the trial level. So when you go to court in the federal court, that's the first court you'll go to, is the federal district courts. Above those courts, where you appeal your decision, you appeal to the Federal Court of Appeals, and there are 11 of those courts across the United States, plus a federal circuit court, and then also the D.C. District of Columbia Circuit Court. And then above those courts, if you lose, you can appeal to the Supreme Court, which has, of course, 9 justices there. And so that's how the kind of federal court system is set up here in the United States.
So how many African Americans are federal judges?
Across the United States, I don't know. It is a small number, but I do know in one of the circuit courts, for example, where I clerked, there has only been 1, 2, 3. There's 4 now. There's only been 4 African American judges, and so there's a dearth of black judges in the United States here.
So now the Supreme Court judges, when they get an appointment, it's a lifetime appointment. Is that correct?
Yep, and it's also a lifetime appointment for the federal judges below the Supreme Court.
That's what I want. It's the lifetime appointment for both the Supreme and the federal.
That's right.
So what about the state judges?
So the state court judges have a similar setup as the federal. You have the state trial courts, and then you have, in some states, you have appellate courts, which in Pennsylvania, they're called the Commonwealth or the Superior Court. And then above there, you have the state Supreme Court as well. And every state has a similar setup as that.
So the state Supreme Court judges, are they appointed or they're elected?
Elected.
Yeah, it depends on the state. In New York, some of them are appointed, and whereas in Pennsylvania here, as Martha said, they're elected. So, yeah.
So has Trump appointed, he's about to appoint someone now to Supreme Court. Is that correct?
Yes.
Has he appointed any to the federal level since he's been out? He has?
One.
Yes.
I think.
This will be his 3rd Supreme Court justice that he will have appointed to the Supreme Court. The federal court level, the federal courts, he has appointed over 300 judges to the federal bench. That's a record. So Donald Trump has put an indelible mark on the federal judiciary with very conservative judges.
And only one black, that's what I was talking about, only one black judge.
Yep.
Oh, okay.
Now, were some of the judge positions left open from the Obama administration? And if so, knowing that President Trump would be able to fill those positions, why didn't President Obama try to fill them before he left office?
So Obama was able to fill a lot of the federal court seats in 2009 and 2010. And then the problem was that the Republicans won the Senate in 2010. And from there on out, the Republicans held the Senate for the rest of Obama's time in office. And as we mentioned, the senators have to confirm judges to go on the bench. And so what happened was the Republicans said, we will not confirm any of President Obama's appointed, nominated judges. And so by the time Obama left office, he wasn't able to get his judges on the bench. Many of them who were African American and persons of color. And the Republicans wouldn't let it happen. And so when he left office, when Trump came in, there was a huge number of seats open, and that's how this has worked.
Yeah.
So.
But the Republicans had been working on this for a long time. I mean, before Trump, they've been placing conservative judges all over the country. There's a book by Catherine Cryer. I forget the title, but it's about that, about how the Republicans have just loaded the bench with conservative judges all over the country.
That's right. And it's unfortunate because we know that, a large part of being a judge is, your life experiences. And so the fact that there are so few Black judges at the federal level and at the state level. We as a community bring certain richness of experiences to the world, and we understand and see the world differently than others. And so, and sometimes at the state level, oftentimes some of the litigants in criminal proceedings, oftentimes they're disproportionately Black. And so, we run into this issue where if a significant number of judges are white, they may already be predisposed. There's internal biases that they have when they're actually making a ruling on a Black litigant, and that's that's an entrenched system of in many ways racism that we need to break. And the only way you break that is by getting diversity onto
Right.
the federal bench. You get diversity into the courts. You put someone like Martha on the Supreme Court, like you do things like that. So yeah.
So, how do you think the Roe versus Wade Act is going to turn out? Do you think that that's possible, that they were going to erase that, eliminate it, or change it?
Martha, I see you.
I think so. Yeah, I think that's why they're appointing the person that they're appointing or intend to appoint,
Mhm, mhm.
because she has a record. She has a very clear record of being against abortion. So I think that's the reason for her appointment.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I agree. I think that's why they're putting her on there. I don't know whether, it's hard to say whether they'll overturn 50 years of precedent. When you think about what judges are supposed to do, they're supposed to follow precedent, and
Mhm.
God willing, we hope that they do that. But putting someone like the judge Amy Barrett on the bench, I think is problematic. And I had mentioned the other
Yeah.
day on social media that there is not a Black woman on the Supreme Court
It isn't.
today.
And we have a caller on the line. James, what's your question or comment?
Yes, I was calling because someone just mentioned that President Trump has named a lot of federal judges to the court system, but
Mhm.
President Obama, he didn't have the chance to do so, to name so many. Could you?
I think he was asking if we were.
Can you comment on why Obama did not have an opportunity to
Right.
send
Yeah.
someone to the Supreme Court?
And I think I mentioned it earlier, and I'll mention it again, that the reason why Obama was unable to get a lot of federal judges onto the bench is because the Senate majority was held by Republicans, and so any nomination that Obama made to get someone on the bench, all the Republicans in the Senate said, we will not confirm this person at all. And so he was stalled, and that wasn't the only thing. Obama was stalled on all kinds of other things, and I suspect there are some underlying issues with regards to the first Black president that the Republicans had for why they did what they did.
Mhm.
Well, Professor Dickinson, how do we start to educate our citizens about the different roles that the president has, the roles that state officials or state politicians have, in terms of, I guess, in terms of how we run the country and how we progress as African Americans? Because I think there's a lack of understanding and education, and we really need to start combating that if we're going to move forward.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Over the last, I don't want, maybe it's longer than 20 years, 30 years or so, there's, for whatever reason, in our schools, civics, civic education, just the very basics of what government is, and it doesn't seem to be as robust and as important as it used to be. And I think that's a huge part of it. And one thing that I think to help fix that problem is, and I do this now, and there are many other African American men and women out there doing it, which is mentoring and actually stepping into schools, whether it be at the elementary school level, middle school level, mentoring, and actually offering your services and knowledge to talk about and to educate about civics, right? About what courts do and what the president does and legislatures do. But it also falls on public schools to really focus in on civics and start to put resources into educating, particularly young Black boys and girls about the importance of civics. And we have to start there for sure.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Do they still teach civics in high school? Are they still?
I don't think so. When I was in school, it was called social studies. I remember talking. Well, I won't tell you what year it was, but
It was civics when I was in school.
But yeah, I don't think the emphasis is there anymore. They're teaching to tests and.
Yep.
Well, Professor, and Martha too, question for you. Can the schools would it be legal for them to register students? Because there's a lot of the students, by the time they graduate, they've either just turned 18 or they're on their way to be turning 18. So can the schools have forms there and register the kids, the seniors?
Yeah.
Why
not?
Hmm?
I don't see why not.
Yeah.
So legally, they should be able to do that.
They would be able to provide the resources and the information on how to do it for sure.
Right.
I do believe that the schools would be permitted to do that, and just educating students and say, hey, here's how you do it. Here's where you go to register to vote and other things like that. And on Martha's point on the civics, I think it's just a lack of emphasis over the years now. We're teaching to test, and that's not getting the job done for our young.
No, it's not.
Well, I'd also like to ask, how do we get our voters aware of what's going on, not only in the city and state, but around the country? Should we be paying attention to Senate elections like for Kentucky? And should we also be donating money to some of these other races that overall affect African Americans?
Yeah, I think so. Certainly Kentucky. We should start there. I absolutely. We need to be aware of what's going on, and we need to get Mitch McConnell out of there. He's a huge obstruction to the democratic process, and I think we, as African Americans, we should be donating to his opponent.
That's right. Yep, I agree. Supporting fellow African Americans who are running for office across the country, and also here, as you heard from Mark Brentley on the phone, the last time we had a serious candidate run with raising money in the 18th congressional district here in Western Pennsylvania, and competing, raising a lot of money and actually having name recognition. But it was, I believe, Bird Brown in 1970 against William Moorhead, the famous civil rights NAACP lawyer. So, and the highest office that African Americans have held here in Western Pennsylvania is State House. It's 2020, and that's the highest office that we've ever. And so, my congressional race when I ran, and it was a very competitive race against Mike Doyle. That was the first time in a long time that we've had a competitive race with a serious African American challenger. And so we want to be able to also support those across the country, but we want to really groom, as Mark said, talented Black men and women to get in the office here in Pittsburgh as well.
Yeah.
Well, a couple of weeks ago, we had a panel discussion, and it included Reverend Welch, who had run for City Council District 9. And so we had asked her to give us her thoughts on how we elect African Americans when they run. So could you tell us what you think in terms of what we as African Americans need to do to get other African Americans in office?
Mhm.
locally and, I mean, for the city, state.
Just for me, and then I'll pass it to Martha. It's identifying talent as early as possible, right? Because it does, you just don't wake up one day and say, I want to run for office, right? You do have to, there's a certain level of preparation that you have to get ready to do it, but both mentally, physically, psychologically, and financially, right? You got to have some money to do this. And historically, this is dating back to slavery. The money for Black candidates it is much less, it's not less accessible than it is for white candidates. And so, we have to be able to identify Black candidates early on, but then also start to realize that we need to fundraise and get the money that we need to run. I'd love to create a pipeline. I mean, I think that's really what we need here in Pittsburgh is a pipeline for Black candidates, a program of sorts that we can really start to groom young men and women and get them ready to run for office and change the world. So
That's an excellent idea.
Will you be doing that?
So I've been mentoring, yes.
Okay.
Mentoring and doing what I need to do to identify folks. I spend a lot of time just with young Black men and women, just talking through what it means to run for office. And I think one thing that came out of my congressional race against Mike Doyle, and maybe someday again, who knows, is that for the first time in a long time, a lot of Black boys and Black girls were watching and seeing an African American man run at one of the highest levels, federal office, Congress. And I think that opened up eyes. People said to themselves, I want to do that. I think I want to do that too. I can't tell you how many phone calls I've received, emails, letters from folks who say, you did this, tell me how you did it. I came up out of the foster care system. I mean, I'm not supposed to be where I'm at. I mean, statistically, it's just, and so people say, I want to know how you did this, and I'm happy to do that. And I think we need, a program of sorts, a robust program to really make it work for
Okay.
Well, I think that we are nearing the end of our program. I think that it's been very informative, and I hope that our viewers have learned something from it and that it has motivated them to vote and to also start reaching out to our young people to get them involved in the voting process and in the process of running for office.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have something to add, Ms. Paylor-Deas?
Oh, no. Well, I just want to thank all the viewers and the callers that called in with their very interesting questions. And definitely we want to thank Professor Jerry Dickinson. And we're looking forward to your next run for Congress.
You put pressure on me.
And Martha, when are you going to run?
I'll have to give that some thought.
Okay, well, you let us know so we can work for you.
Okay.
But thank you very much. And Jerry, we really appreciate your attendance this evening.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
It's been very informative.
Thank you so much. And for those out there, I'll leave this. My office number at the University of Pittsburgh, it is, if you have a pen and pencil and a paper, it is 412-624-2415. That's 412-624-2415. Please reach out at any time to have a conversation. If you want to talk more about politics and law and whatever else it is, I'm more than happy to do that. All right. So it's 412-624-2415.